everyone. Welcome in to the Her Hoops Stats podcast. It is Thursday, December 18th. Yes, you're hearing my voice here for a second time. It is Jamie Steyer Johnson. And am I excited because I get to do a couple of episodes this week and reunited. It feels so good. We're back here with Coach Williams. It's been a while since I had the pleasure.
It has been forever. Let me take some of my iced coffee here from Dunkin' Donuts. Excuse me. It's been forever, but I did think about you last week when the Cyhawk game was going on. Like, I know Jamie is excited and happy. So you were on my mind, but I get to see you today. I get to, as my mama used to say, I get to lay eyes on you today.
Exactly. Well, it's funny because I know that obviously I'm well known for the association with Iowa State, and literally as the game was about ready to tip off, I was getting texts from Chelsea Late asking what color I was wearing so that she could confirm that she had in fact found me on press row watching on TV. So I'm like, hey, I appreciate the effort there. But yeah, it was certainly a fun game there. It's been a fun stretch to start the season, and it's been a lot of fun basketball, not just here in Ames, but man, all over the place. We've got some crazy stuff going on. We have a little bit of not a complete lull, but things are slowing down a little bit for the holiday season. So we can start kind of catching our breath a little bit, I think.
Yeah, for sure. This is a good time of the year because it forces coaches to give their players some rest when they probably would have more practice than they should. And it gives the players an opportunity to decompress, and really for everybody to reset. I used to love the holidays and it didn't have to be a very long time, but just a day, maybe two, where obviously as coaches, we're always thinking about what we need to do, but we didn't have to do it in the office, and the kids were, with their family, and they could get away from basketball for a millisecond. And so, I've always enjoyed this time of the year.
Yeah, it definitely is necessary. Like even as much as any team loves each other, loves being around each other, loves playing, practicing, all that, like you need a little bit of that balance. But before we get to that break, there are a handful of really great games. There are some teams that I think have an opportunity to, as I put it before we started recording, get a signature win or perhaps add another signature win. So we're going to talk a couple of these upcoming matchups first. And then before we're done here today, we're going to revisit some of your key points for championship teams now that we've seen a good bit of basketball across the country. So I'm going to start here just going through a couple of the teams that we've seen some pretty impressive showings from that maybe are flying under the radar for people. And they've got some opportunities here to end their non-conference slates with a bang. And these are non-quote unquote power conference teams here. So first off, South Dakota State, one of the best mid-majors in the country.
Jackrabbits.
And it is not close. They are, man.
They're always good. I did their NCAA tournament game against Virginia Tech that year when Virginia Tech hosted it. And God forbid and I don't know what it is about them, but for some reason people say San Diego State instead of South Dakota State. I don't know what that is. I made that mistake one time, and I'm not even on Twitter during the game. Oh my goodness. I got the business because, and then it just made me self-conscious. So finally my producer goes, stop saying that. Just say Jackrabbits. I'm like, okay, that I can do. I will not mess up South Dakota State, man. Their fans, and I guess it happens to them a lot. They were not happy with me. So I was like, I'm just going to go with Jackrabbits. So I'm just way off the page with what you were going to say. But yeah, they're always fantastic. That coach, he's won a national championship. I believe it was D2 at some point. Just a phenomenal program.
Yeah, I mean, they are a team that is competitive year in and year out. And then they've done such a great job of building good schedules. And as we've discussed on this podcast, everyone I think on here has discussed at some point, like how difficult it is to schedule in college period, but especially as a good mid-major. And they gave themselves the chance to to really do something this year. And they've definitely shown what they're capable of. Like, they're not undefeated, but they've got a really great win under their belt with beating Kansas State. And now they get to end their kind of non-conference ramp up with a couple of, I think, great opportunities here where they go to Duke, who is still a very solid team, but as you know, as has been well documented, they've had some struggles. And so I think that that is a prime opportunity for South Dakota State to really put themselves to the test and look to pick up yet another power conference win. And then they've got Texas coming to them. And so, that, am I picking South Dakota State there? No, I don't think so. But I
Stranger
mean,
things have happened.
and you don't have to win the game to prove how capable you are as the team. That's I think the biggest key for me is you can prove a lot, and it doesn't really have all that much to do with whether you win or lose the game. It's giving yourself the opportunity to compete against elite talent. And so scheduling the game is huge, and doing what they've done up to this point in the non-conference to prepare themselves for that level of competition, I think is just really, really exciting. So I'm looking forward to those couple of games. One of them tonight, the day we're recording, the 18th at Duke, and then they've got Texas right before the break.
Yeah, one of the things, their gap in the conference is not as big as UConn and everybody else in the Big East, but South Dakota State's pretty much, they stay healthy, they're going to win the conference. The key thing about what you're talking about, though, is the eye test, right? Now, you beat Kansas State, so that's great. That's a great Power Four win. But how you perform the eye test, I think, is really key to, if for some odd reason you don't win your conference and you're trying to get in that large bid, the committee wants to know that you can compete against the top teams in the country.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you just give yourself that little bit of a cushion where, okay, you are favored to win your conference, but as we know, that margin is so slim where if you have to win your conference, weird things can happen. And so if you give yourself just enough justification to say, if we slip up once or twice, we still have this opportunity because we've proven we can hang with great teams, that's going to be huge. And especially when you have a player like Brooklyn Meyer, who, again, flies a little bit under the radar nationally, but is such a capable player and, deserves to be on a lot of these watch lists, deserves to be talked about. I think that seeing her play, especially against Duke, is going to be really good. She's the kind of player that I think matches up well with the style they're going to see there. So I'm definitely really looking forward to that one here today, Thursday. We'll see kind of how that one shakes out.
Yeah, and kudos to teams like Texas and South Carolina and other Power Four teams who will travel to South Dakota, not just for the competition, but for the good of the game, right? There's going to be a ton, it's going to be packed, and so it's going to be a great atmosphere. But kudos to them for scheduling and making that trip.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm in the Midwest, so I can say this. Like, there's not a whole heck of a lot else to do a lot of the time. And so that's why you have places like Iowa, places like North Dakota, South Dakota. Like, they love their college teams, and it shows, especially when you get those big matchups. So that'll be really a fun one. Another one that, okay, this is flying, I think, very under the radar because of their overall record. But Southern is perennially so competitive within their conference. They schedule about as tough as is humanly possible in the non-conference. Last year had their really huge, signature win over Oklahoma going into Christmas break. And then this year, they're on a 3-game winning streak, including wins over both Arizona and Houston. And of course, I saw them very early in the season. I always say always schedule Southern. And they, first of all, absurdly well coached. Like, they always come in and they know what they are doing. Like, they are going to be tough. They are hard nosed. They are going to run the ball. Like, I hate playing against it. Like, they are so tough to play against, but I love watching them play because they know who they are. They know what they're doing. And they have 2 more road tests here coming into the break. One of them, again, tonight at Baylor. And call me crazy, I think this could be a game because I would be surprised if Talia Scott's playing.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's gonna be a big factor of whether or not she's still injured, and hopefully, if she is, it's not something that's going to last the season. But I agree with you. They schedule really tough, partly for for the budget,
Mhm.
but also it reminds me of as a coach when your practices are harder than the games. By the time you get to the game, it's easier. By the time they get to conference play, they have seen top level tournament
Mhm.
type teams, and if there are any flaws, they've seen them. They've been exposed, so they have an opportunity to shore that up by the time they get to the conference games.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that they go in and then they tend to perform extremely well in conference play. And so obviously there's something to be said for that strategy of scheduling and being able to keep that level of confidence and saying, okay, we're going to take our lumps here in the non-con, but it pays off. And year after year, they're able to prove that yes, this strategy does work. If you're going in and you're just kind of limping into conference play, that would be perhaps a tougher sell. But I really enjoy watching them in the non-conference, and then because they just kind of they really
They
get
get
rolling
after
when they
it.
get into
They get
swag
after it.
play. Yeah, and so I think that Baylor is I mean, a huge opportunity for them just because of the fact that Baylor is lacking in some depth. And so if Talia Scott is out, they're going to be playing a very different style from what they've done all season. They should still be capable, obviously, of coming away with a win, but I think that this is a game that could be extremely competitive. And then they also have the opportunity for Southern to go over to SMU this coming week. And this is an SMU team that again has been so up and down. And it really just can add to, I think, their confidence. They've already beat a team that statistically is ranked quote unquote better than SMU in Arizona. And so I think that this is going to be a very interesting stretch of games here for a Southern team that has more than once gone into conference play with like 2 wins under their belt, but still looked like a great team. They have a chance to put themselves at nearly 500. And so I'm really watching what they're doing because they once they get into swag play, they tend to kind of get rolling. But I think that these two games could be really big.
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of SMU. They're up and down, not quite sure what you're going to get from game to game, and so you can be sure that both those coaches, the coaches of Baylor and SMU, are like doing their best to make sure that this team is not taken lightly by their players.
Yeah, and I mean, shoot, you want to talk about preparing you for conference play? We've talked about what that does for Southern, but for both Baylor and SMU getting ready to go into Big 12 and ACC conference play, like going against great defense, going against really aggressive defense, like you're going to see from Southern, and going against teams that are going to really attack the rim, like they would like to get to the free throw line, they want to get in there, like they could shoot from outside. They have game like Southern has games where they just get really hot. They're a little bit streaky in that way, but
Yeah, they can go
man,
on a heater.
they do. But like they're going to do things that great teams try to do. Like again, it's just about that efficiency. And so being able to get that last sort of tune up in Subway, and tune up makes it sound like it's a given that you're getting the win, and that's it's not the case. But going against good competition and teams that are good at things that you will need to be prepared for
Right.
definitely can work in your favor. But got to take care of business, and so that's certainly going to be very interesting. Like I said, there's not a ton of games that I think people are having highlighted on their calendars, but man, there's going to be a couple that I think get the headline the next day because people are like, I didn't even know that I should be paying attention to that.
Right. Exactly. Totally agree.
So last couple ones, I'm not going to spend as much time on these few here because I want to make sure that we get to some of our other topics for today. But we have a couple of teams that have already had pretty solid production so far, and just I think have the opportunity to add to it, or maybe just prove on another level what they're capable of. We have a Belmont team who has been really close in a lot of really good games. Most recently, losing to Kentucky by only 8 points gave them a heck of a game. And again, to your point of teams traveling and being willing to go on the road, I thought the Kentucky playing at Belmont was certainly a great test for them. I think that that's the kind of thing that really prepares you for conference play. So a lot of props on that one. And Belmont also had a close one with another team that we were talking about before we started recording, which was Princeton. And so that's the last two losses that Belmont suffered was to Princeton, Kentucky. They have another opportunity against who else would we be talking about here but Duke. Duke is going to Belmont. So again, another team that is challenging themselves going on the road. And frankly, Duke does need the practice against good competition because they absolutely have the ability to pull things together and really make some noise in conference play. But they've taken their lump. So I think that Belmont is certainly a really interesting one. We've also got Davidson that'll be playing NC State. And so there's a lot of potential there. And finally, wrapping it up with Princeton and, first of all, Princeton. I saw them obviously in their last game of the year last year, and I was very impressed. They really have just taken things up, I think, another level this year. Like I feel like every single player has taken a pretty significant step forward. When you have all five of your starters averaging 11 or more points per game, that balance, that's rare.
Yeah, I'm always going to be a big Ivy League fan. I mentioned, I think it was my podcast with Cindy. We're talking about before the season, Carla Berube was 65-5 in conference play, and I do think that they have a chip on their shoulder because last year it was not totally within their control whether or not they got into the tournament. And I think they want to make sure them and Lefty Madison St. Rose wants to make sure that there's no questions to be answered, that we should be in the tournament. We're going to win everything. So that's going to be a great game. Belmont, Bart Brooks, he's a great coach. He's over there on the sidelines. I never see him go off or get upset. It's unnerving to me how calm he is. But he has a great basketball mind. And he honestly, I think, could have been, and not that he won't, could have gotten jobs at higher levels.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you're happy where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And he does a phenomenal job there. He knows he can recruit. He's going to get some players who didn't get the time that they wanted elsewhere, that when they come to Belmont, they know they're going to be able to play. He's had a couple players that were so good that the Power Four took him, so he can definitely recruit. And then Davidson, they move so well. Their offense is so fluid, and it's not totally positionless, but they're very hard to guard. So, you look at that league and you have Richmond, you have Davidson, and people are assuming it's going to be Richmond, but, Davidson's they play a tough schedule because they want to make sure that they are considered for an at-large.
Well, and I think back to early in non-conference, I said something online about Davidson, and I got a reply from them. They said, we like to think of it as position more basketball. I said,
Okay.
There you go. Like I love what they do. I think they're so fun to watch. And so I think that especially for, as you said, these are conferences that have some teams that very well could be deserving of at-large bids. And so it's about kind of your perception. It's about the opportunities you give yourself to boost that resume. And so we're seeing, I think, that significant emphasis on giving themselves opportunity to add those important wins to the resume. And so certainly got some really big ones here coming up as we wrap up the non-conference slate. All right. So let's go ahead and shift gears a little bit here. We've got some really solid matchups that are going to take some of the headlines, right? We have the Champions Classic, so we've got Louisville and Tennessee, as well as Iowa and UConn, and so certainly very interesting as far as some final non-conference matchups here for these teams. But you mentioned a couple of games that are kind of your headlines that are maybe flying a little bit under the radar, but not so much under the radar teams, just maybe matchups that people don't realize are as big as they are. And those are Texas Tech going to Baylor and then Oregon Stanford. And so let's organize this a little bit. I just threw a lot out there.
You did.
Let's start here. I'm just previewing for the people, for the people skipping through listening for their team, I guess. Let's start here with the Champions Classic. Louisville, Tennessee, and Iowa and UConn. What are you looking for from these matchups?
So Louisville was picked 4th in the conference, and Jeff Walz is a great coach. His game day walkthrough is a full practice. I remember when I went, because I always go to shoot around. It is a full practice. It's not a walkthrough. It is a full practice, and he is coaching his rear end off during the full practice like it's the regular game. So, his team, I think they're starting to hit their stride at the right time. Obviously they beat UNC last week in overtime, or was it this week? That was the last game they played. They beat them in overtime. They were picked 4th. Laura Ziegler, who came over from St. Joe's, is a huge, huge pickup for them. She helps them spread the floor, got a high basketball IQ, can pick and pop, shoot the three. She can I always say she's an exquisite passer, very great vision. And then the pickup of Scott is a great addition. Mari Berry starting to play well, not quite where he would like for her to be. She never is, because he's really hard on her because she has so much talent. And then Istanbulolu, who I think has improved from last year to this year, and she wasn't terrible last year.
No.
So those 4 players, and then a player that I don't think a lot of people are talking about is McKinley Randolph. Mm-hmm. She was a freshman last year, sometimes part starter, averaging I think like 19 minutes a game, 6.5 points. But that's a kid that can really help Louisville go far if she will just continue to improve and be consistent. She's very skilled, has a versatile skill set. So, Louisville, I think just, in terms of trying to make sure that they're ready for the rest of the conference play is, I think they're doing a good job. UConn is UConn. It's not fair, but it is what it is. They would have to there would have to be so many things go wrong for them not to get to the Final Four. However, there are always things that they can improve on, and I'm sure that Gino, I'm sure when he looks at film, never picks out the good stuff because everybody's already telling them all the good stuff. So I'm just looking for them to, whether we know what they are or not, I'm looking for them to shore up whatever flaws they feel like they have, as a team. And then who were the other 2?
We've got Tennessee is playing Louisville, and then Iowa plays UConn.
Okay. So Tennessee has to figure out, what's the best way to say this? Half-court defense is not their jam. Right? So
yeah, that's fair.
It's not their jam. So you better be on your P's and Q's with your full court and not let it get to the point where you have to spend some time in half court. And I'm sure they practice half court defense too. It's not like they don't. But their style of play is predicated on, we're going to be full court. We're going to cause a lot of problems. And, we're going to make sure that you don't have time to run your offense. And we're going to come down and we're going to we're going to throw up threes, and we're going to get long rebounds, and so that is their thing. If they don't allow teams to get them into their half court defense, they're going to be fine. And then you're either on or off with the threes, right?
Mhm.
But you can always rebound, you can always defend. So for them, I think that's an interesting thing. Iowa losing to Iowa State last week. I think that they have a lot of. I love Chit Chat. What a great nickname. Um, but I think their front court is going to have to be more consistent. When they played Iowa State, I was like, and I'm saying this as somebody who's 5'6", and there's no way I can play in the post. I'm like, don't let Audi Crooks get to her spot, right? I mean, listen, Audi's going to go where Audi wants to go. And she's developed that fadeaway now. So if you push her out a little bit, got that little one-legged thing going on. I'm like, look at you, girl. So you've got to make Audi play defense on the perimeter. Like, you got to pull her out and then go around her. And I didn't think Iowa did that, but partly, Iowa, they got into foul trouble. So they cannot get into foul trouble.
Mhm.
I think that's the biggest thing for them. And then, get to the free throw line. Iowa's a good team, and they're going to cause some problems in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I really am fascinated by this matchup between UConn and Iowa, and part of that also being because of just the way that UConn's schedule works. It's not like this is anything new, but they have to do a lot of their work for
They
developing
have
themselves in the
out of conference.
non-con. Yep, and
Yeah.
so, this is one of their last potential big challenges. They face Notre Dame partway through their conference season. They go over and go out of conference for that one, but otherwise, they're going to be playing against the Big East, which is down a little bit this year just because of how old the conference was across the board for so long.
Yeah.
And so now they've got a lot of young teams where UConn is not really that. And so they're not going to see some of the challenges that they even have seen in conference play in the past couple of years. And that's to say there haven't been a ton of those regardless. So I'm really interested to see how UConn comes out. We saw them have their toughest game of the year against Michigan earlier this season.
That was a great test for them. That
It
was a
was.
that was a great test for them. And I think for them, obviously, like you said, you got to get your competition, your tournament competition out of the
Mhm.
league. But I think with the Big East, one of the things that they'll be able to do, because they're always going to be up by 20, 30 or whatever, is they'll be able to play some people that's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,
Mhm.
some extended quality real time minutes. And
Mhm.
they're going to need their bench once they start getting into the tournament play. So I think that's going to be an advantage for them.
Absolutely. And so just to kind of put a bow on that matchup there, I think that being able to see someone who is very strong defensively, like Hannah Sulky going up against Sarah Strong, like, do I think she's going to shut her down? No, not necessarily. But do I think that's a terrible matchup? No, I don't think it's a terrible matchup. And so there's going to be, I think, a lot of potential as far as that goes. I also think that there's a lot of potential for Iowa. To your point, they do have a very solid front court, and so Sarah Williams is someone who is not altogether unfamiliar to Iowa. And so I'll be really interested to see what they try to do as far as the post. Obviously, that means that you have to take care of the ball. That means you have to be able to get the ball into the post. But I think that there's definitely going to be a lot for both of these teams to learn from this matchup, but it's just about how tight it ends up being in the actual game. And, again, it's something that the general thought is, well, it's UConn. And so games are kind of theirs unless proven otherwise. But I think that tight game with Michigan shows that there are some ways to exploit that, and especially with Chit Chat getting healthier and really finding a rhythm there, that's certainly going to be a huge matchup to watch. So It's gonna be a really interesting couple of games there back to back. We got a lot of different styles, a lot of really dynamic players that are gonna be playing in that doubleheader. All right, so last couple matchups that I know we want to hit before we get to kind of our last segment here. So coming up on the 21st, so Sunday, we've got a couple of games that are going to tell us a lot about some teams, I think, that we maybe have seen play, but haven't quite been able to place as far as where they're at in the national landscape, just because of some of the level of competition or against some of the kind of inconsistency we've seen. Those being Texas Tech going to Baylor, and then we're going to get Oregon Stanford. So let's start with Texas Tech Baylor, because as we mentioned earlier, Baylor, huge question mark right now is the health of Talia Scott, because that is going to completely change the complexion of their team depending on whether she's playing or not. Texas Tech, one of the, I think, big surprises of the non-conference season. And have they played the top of the top? No, but they've won all of their games, and that, is not necessarily a given regardless of who you're playing. So what are you kind of looking to take away from that matchup coming up this weekend?
Yeah, I think Texas Tech, they just did a whole revamp of their coaching staff, which was necessary. I think last year, I remember during their game against Colorado, they were just kind of stagnant offensively.
Hmm.
And they didn't get a whole lot from more than just, I'm blanking on the kid's name now, who's really good for them. Gosh dang it.
Bailey Maupin's generally the
Yes,
leader.
Bailey
Yep.
Maupin. Bailey
Hmm.
Maupin. Sorry, Bailey. I know who you are, kid. I know who you are. And I thought that, this year they're finding ways to get her the basketball. And listen, smart scheduling, right?
Hmm.
This was a year, let's be honest, that coach needed to win this year. Been tough the last 3 or 4 years, so needed to win. So I'm sure kept that in mind so that they could have some sort of rhythm and some sort of momentum going into the conference play. So I think just making sure that their offense is fluid, and then keeping Baylor off the boards,
Hmm.
keeping Baylor off the free throw line are going to be two big things.
And the experience coming in off the bench with Snetta Collins is going to be crucial going into Big 12 play for them. She's been really a game changer, their second leading scorer coming in off the bench, and just that level of experience, that level of versatility. Like, I always forget how tall she is until you start looking at the lineup. You're like, oh right, like she is 6'1", but she is like legit guard skills. She's great in the mid range. So that's been certainly a huge boost for them to add out of the portal. And then Jalen Bristow, I mean, obviously a player I'm very familiar with, started her career at Iowa State, ended up wanting to go closer to home. And last year was, I think, a little bit of an adjustment period, but that was kind of the case across the board for Texas Tech. This year, as you said, they revamped a lot about their system, about their coaching staff, and players are thriving for it. Jalen has been really, really solid for them. She's averaging 14.7 and a half boards per game. Like, she is just an incredible athlete. And I think that she's settled in a lot more. She has that level of familiarity there. So they have, one of my favorite words is versatility, and they do have a lot of that versatility on this roster. I think that there's going to be certain situations where there's tough matchups, but I don't think there's anyone that you look at and say, well, they can't guard so and so, or they can't guard this team. They can't handle that system. And so it's just going to be about what level they can play up to. Oregon Stanford.
Washington Stanford, not Oregon. Washington Stanford.
Washington Stanford.
Yeah.
Yes. Let me adjust my my notes here. I'm glad that someone's on top of things. We've made it this far without me stumbling. Yes, because it's Washington and then Oregon. So Oregon's the neutral site game, but before that, we've got Washington, which frankly, both of these are intriguing, but I have a lot of questions about Washington to be answered as well. So let's start with that one. What are you looking for from Stanford and Washington?
Yeah, I think Washington. They return starters. Their only loss is to USC, and they did some good work in the portal. So looking for them to make sure they take care of the basketball. I think Stanford, based on the year they had last year, I think people have had questions coming into this year. But I've watched several of their games, and kudos to whoever is the recruiting coordinator for for Stanford, because their freshman Eschmeyer, Swain, Sampai, and then the junior Agara. And of course, I'm in love with their offense because I love the Princeton offense. I just love it. And they run, elements of that. And they have been playing extremely well. So I'm really looking for them to continue. The continued development of their freshmen is going to be really, really important as they get into the conference play. And I think they've gotten a lot of playing time over the course of the non-conference season. So once they start conference, it's not going to be something where they're like deer in the headlights. And so that's going to be interesting to me. And Washington, to me, I'm looking to see if they could prove that they earned that number 22 spot that they got this year in the this week in the top 25.
All right, Coach. We've hit a lot of games. We've been able to discuss a lot of matchups, a lot of teams, and this is in a week where we said, there's not that many games.
I know. We're like, what are we going to talk about tomorrow?
And yet here we are. I want to wrap up here, kind of revisiting something that you've discussed before, and we certainly will discuss later, and that's the 5 keys to winning a championship. So some of them are still up in the air, will need to be developed, determined as we go along. But there's a couple of them that you have said we're starting to get a good idea about for some of these contenders.
Yeah, so the 5 are, you got to have some luck. That's to be determined. You got to be healthy. That's to be determined. And then the coaching, that's kind of a given. If you're going to get in the Final Four, I mean, obviously you have a coach. But what I was looking at is, the defense and the depth, right? And there's a difference between having a bench and having a productive bench. So if you look at teams that I think are going to go far, you look at TCU in terms of defense. They're first in the country. They're only allowing 49 points a game. They're 9th in the country in the top 10, only allowing 24% for 3-point shooting field goal percentage. So that's key. And that's in addition to Miss Triple Double and the ginormous size and your words, the versatility. They're 4th in the country in defensive rebounds, 7th in the country in blocks. So the defensive side for them is something that I think is going to take them, far. If you look at Louisville, their bench is averaging 35 points a game. So that's a plus for them, obviously, for them doing really well. Michigan, top 10, they're averaging 33 points a game off the bench. Texas, top 10 in the country, forcing turnovers, plus their tough schedule, right? They've had a very tough schedule. And then, don't forget about Maryland. Their first 4 conference games are, games that they should handle. But then they've got Ohio State, USC, UCLA, Iowa, and Washington, all ranked 5 ranked teams in a row. And so I think really when you're looking at we're going to go ahead and put UConn in the Final Four. That's kind of like a given unless something crazy happens. And then feel pretty good about Texas unless they, have some key injuries. But all these other teams, like how far can they go? And I think that's going to be a big part of it is how they defend. And then the bench. If you look at LSU, their bench is averaging almost 50 points a game, right? So you can look at them and say, hey, it's a cupcake schedule, of course, but that's Kim Mulkey's recipe. And people like me can say all I want to say about a light schedule, but it's worked for Kim Mulkey. But I do like Cindy Brunson's take on it, where she said that, Kim Mulkey's developing confidence. So she's got the talent. I am still, for me, it's still to be determined what that bench will do in the SEC, right? Because you're going to see a lot of different styles of play. It could be very physical. if they can get themselves through that, then they have a chance to go really far too. So those are the two things: defense and not just depth, but productive depth.
Mhm. Yeah, productive, efficient, like where you have those teams where they really can rotate through and there isn't a huge drop off. And that also goes to some of your other points, which is for health, if you have that level of depth, if someone gets hurt or if someone is a little bit hampered by an injury and they're still playing, if you have that level of depth, you can make up for that a little bit easier. Or if you have a bunch of your bench that you're playing consistently, maybe your stars are less likely to get injured. Like all of those things are really crucial to work together. But that is a great couple of points, I think, especially again, as we get into this point where, regardless of what teams have faced in the non conference, we're going to start seeing better competition. We're going to start seeing some of these teams that haven't really had a challenge as of yet have those fights or potentially have those tighter games. And so that's where we really start seeing how legitimate the defense is, how legitimate the depth is, if they're producing regardless of what that competition looks like. And so that's where I think teams really start to separate.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the depth, like once you get to it, it's going to be a dogfight getting through like Big Ten, SEC. It's going to be a dogfight, and you want your players to be healthy come tournament time. You want them to be quote unquote rested. You don't want to have to play your starters 40 minutes a game, and so
Mhm,
that's also why your depth is so important, so that you can give them a little bit of a respite. Right?
mhm,
That's why there's a concern with South Carolina. Dawn
mhm,
can coach your rear end off, but are they going to have enough?
mhm,
Not even talent, just numbers to be able to get through the SEC and get to the Final Four, right? Or you have a team like LSU, they're playing everybody. Nobody's playing a gazillion minutes. They're all rested. They're ready for the conference play. So that dynamic, I think, is really important too when you're looking at being at your peak and ready to compete once the NCAA tournament starts.
mhm. Well, folks, hopefully that gives you a little something. If you're wanting to put your analyst hat on as we start getting into conference play, there you go. You've got a couple of keys. If you're chopping it up around the water cooler, you start pulling out, the defense, the depth. You're analyzing that. You're gonna be the expert. So there you go. That's a
That's
freebie
what you
there.
get from Her Hoop Stats. That's what you get
Exactly.
from us. Knowledge, so that you are, when you get to that water cooler, you can be telling people something.
Exactly, exactly. That's what we're here for. That's what our site's here for. So there you go. That's our gift to you here today on the
Happy
Her Hoop Stats
holidays.
podcast. Yes, exactly. Folks, thanks so much for tuning in today. I've been here with Coach Williams at a coach for the number 4, the coach. On social media, I have been Jamie Steyer Johnson. You can find me at J Styes. And of course, make sure you are following Her Hoop Stats for all the content we've got coming out. We've got newsletters coming left, right, and center on anything and everything you could have questions about. They're absolutely tremendous. Make sure you're subscribed to those. Follow us on social media at Her Hoop Stats, and make sure that you are subscribed to the site as well. Got every kind of analytics you could ever want. If you need just the simple ones, we've got rankings for every individual stat for team stats, but got some of those advanced analytics as well. You can start learning, really boost that repertoire. We'll be back here with another episode Gower tomorrow, and then we'll have kind a little bit of a layoff for Christmas, but generally we will be back here daily during the week, and we'll be back. We'll see you when we see you. Safe travels, happy holidays, and we'll see y'all next time. Thanks.
When we see you.